Okay, we are live. IPS Evening Deprogram, 10:30 p.m. Mountain Time, May 6th, 2025. This is a psyop-rich environment, as we've been discussing. And I'm doing this twice a day. Morning is mostly just to set the stage and cover anything we missed during the evening. And evenings for open phones. Or in this case, we're going to be using StreamYard. So if you want to get in, I'm going to put a link below. And all you need to do is click the link and it will add you to the waiting room. And you can comment. So I earmarked most of the things we're going to talk about on my Twitter feed. So let's go ahead and jump right over there. A couple of things. Another one of these divisive psyops where people are taking sides in a very partisan way. This is the case of Hinton. So I'm not sure the full name, Rodney Hinton Jr. So the story was this guy's son is killed by cops in one of these shootings. I'll put this on the screen so you can see. And he seemingly took revenge by running over an unrelated police officer, a retired officer, the day after. And you have people cheering this guy on. So here we have this is Father's love runs deep. The police took his son's life, so the next day he ran over an officer and ended his life too. Rodney Hinton Jr. was not playing about his son. Sad face emoji, broken heart emoji. So this is rather insane logic. But like we saw with Shiloh, Hendricks, and Austin Metcalf, these psyops bring out the worst in people, and you can see what people really think. And that's one of the interesting things about these psychological operations and hoaxes. We're responding to these things. We're responding to these things with information that leads us to think that maybe this is designed to entangle us emotionally. And so we have like a 10-foot pole. I social distance myself from the screen. I don't take anything at face value. And the context of this, with everything else we've been talking about of late, it looks like this is part of a series of psyops, perhaps leading up to what Tucker Carlson had prophesied with Alex Jones. Tucker Carlson said he believes there's going to be an anti-racist hate crime mass murder against like Patriot Front or something like that. And that's exactly what we saw at the end of that movie that ties into all of this, Sinners, where the protagonist guns down the Klan. So there's this buildup going on. And then this. And in the scene where Rodney Hinton Jr. was taken out of the courtroom, he was surrounded by cops because you kill a cop, obviously a lot of them are going to show up. And his own family didn't have room in there because there's so many police officers. And people are calling him brave for his composure as he was being escorted out. And it reminds me of how they made Luigi Mangione look like a hero, like Joker. How they gave him a perp walk that looked like a movie poster designed to make him into an anti-hero. So I'm just seeing this element of the anti-hero injected into this story as well. We've been talking about woke right, and I can't take credit for it, but I have been talking about this for some time. And about a month ago, I coined right-wing wokeism. And I was drawing this parallel between leftist wokeism, right-wing wokeism, how they're just a mirror of one another. And now that term's gone somewhat mainstream. Here's Matt Walsh crying about it. Can you give me some specific examples of people who are woke right? And this debate is continuing, but I'm just pointing it out that there seems to be people noticing that there's fundamentally no difference in the fringes. And the political horseshoe theory isn't a theory, it's a model. It's how they built this thing. And anybody who's in that horseshoe is therefore inside of the mainstream mediation box, brainwashed. And we have this excellent example of brainwashing to point at with the security guard who examined the Trump assassination attempt in Butler and concluded that it had to have been faked. But because he's in the box, he couldn't reconcile this with the shooter and the fireman who was killed. So he had to add to the story. And this is what we call MSM plus. You're in the box, something doesn't make sense, so you have to have a conspiracy theory to fill in the blanks. Conspiracy theories are always wrong by design. It's one of my recent conclusions about things like UFOs. These are intentionally spread out there in order to basically mess with people's minds, align them in a certain way, control their perceptions. It's a pattern which we have been discussing at length. But this security guard is baffled. So his explanation wasn't, well, if this was fake, the whole thing was fake, which is reasonable. If he faked it, then what? And you could actually arrive at a logical conclusion just by following along with what that would entail. But what he did was he said, okay, well, they must have found a degenerate to be a patsy and told him to shoot and miss, and he accidentally killed the fireman. You see, that's convoluted and nonsensical. But you can only arrive at that if you're in the box. So when I say that we have an expanded perception on this thing, our perspective takes into perspective things that other people don't even know. Fakeability is a huge part of it. So we're looking at these events, all these events, with the broader context, which is why we don't believe it. I don't think you can believe a headline. I mean, do you? Like, oh, it's a headline, let me just believe the story. No, you'd have to, unless you just fundamentally trust the author. And that, to me, becomes an appeal to an authority. It's kind of fallacious reasoning. It's lazy. But no, obviously you don't. But just because you've read the article, can you say you know enough? And we kind of build on that. And when we take into account the broader context, the fake just reveals itself. Joined by Thirst for Truth, Josh Lebsock, Inks G, Hero Paranormal, Roxy W, Shiloh Tell, Copaesthetic, Ears Up, Mazel, Flozik, Verkchun, and Lean Dion. Thanks for joining. So let's go ahead and continue. Trump claims, and there's a lot of hopium being passed around, a lot of it, about Epstein, JFK files, about Trump opening Alcatraz, which, this is all just theater. People respond to everything this guy does. They respond, or rather they react as though everything he says he's going to do, he actually has the power to do. And all I see is people overreacting. So he's talking about opening Alcatraz, and it has his side really energized by it because they like Guantanamo. And that was the last presidency. It was all about Guantanamo and their fantasies about locking up the deep state over there. Well, now they have Alcatraz. But I don't think it's going to happen for a lot of reasons. But regardless, it doesn't matter. This is all political theater. But here he is saying that on Friday, he's going to have a, quote, truly earth-shattering and positive development for this country. And it's not about trade. And right behind him is a space flag. So I saw some tweet, and they're dusting off their old Q drops. I saw a Q drop from 2017. And it's something about major announcement on Friday. So they're like, oh, look, Q said this would happen. So you have a lot of Q people on the edge of their seats, popcorn in hand, waiting for the big revelation. But let's listen to what the president has to say.
And, I said before in our meeting with the new and very talented Prime Minister of Canada that we have some very big announcement to make. It's not about trade. It's about something else, but it's going to be a truly earth-shattering and positive development for this country and for the people of this country.
Okay, well, earth-shattering. I don't know what you all think that might be, but heads up, mark your calendar. Another potential nothing burger. Here's some more information. This is Ryan Hinton's cousin. So Ryan Hinton is the 18-year-old who was killed by the police. And I heard the story. They're saying it was perhaps, what is it called? Open carry, that he was open carrying and he was shot. But the context of the shooting had something to do with him running away, dropping the weapon and picking it up. And this, again, would change it from open carry to possibly brandishing or something, and they killed him. But the reason why I find this questionable is it has the revenge story, it has the anti-hero, it has the internet support for the cop killer, and then the family is given all kinds of screen time. And I look at something like this as very suspect. It's an investigation in progress. There's a lot of factors here, a murder, and so I just think like, okay, this guy has been charged, but innocent until proven guilty. It just seems like this is not something the attorneys would support. Publicizing everything and making it into a TV show. So I'm looking at this Hinton Jr. and Ryan Hinton, the son and the father. I'm looking at this as potentially another hoax.
I'm Ryan cousin. My condolences to everybody involved in this. I just want to say, Ryan, I'm so sorry. God, please watch over the rest of my family. He called me like 6-9 times, like 2012 and one. Called me trying to get in. Text me. I was asleep. I'm so surprised.
Now, there's some background music here, making this very crisis actory. I'm not buying it. It's not. I'm waiting to see the GoFundMes, and anything that has a high profile Give, Send, Go GoFundMe is suspect. That's one of the ways they pay their crisis actors, we've noticed. And Give, Send, Go obviously is part of this. The fact that they allowed these parallel stories to blow up and they platformed that kind of rhetoric, yeah, that's definitely some kind of collusion. Plus, they're making money off of it. Joined by Shannon Jones. Thanks for joining. Yeah, we're doing well, and we're going twice a day, and this is all in preparation for the summer. It's looking like we might have some kind of significant activity this summer, something comparable to the summer of 2020. Just rumblings indicating this. I'm thinking 6/11 is looking very suspect, by the way. And I'm not into prophecy dates or anything, but they are. The dates they choose aren't arbitrary. 9/11, I'm assuming, has something to do with the New Year, Coptic New Year. There's some significance to every one of these dates. It's all based on the sun, the calendar, witches' sabbats. Like we just had May Day, major witch holiday, satanic holiday, Travis Scott's birthday, International Workers' Day, but it's a big deal as far as the pagan calendar. You would think Halloween was their big day, but no, it's actually Beltane. And I think the Beltane rituals are performed in public spectacles and events. So in this case, I would suggest that the Lady Gaga concert would tie in with that. Her stuff is always very occultic, very Crowley all over it. And then I saw some people tweeting about this Met Gala event. I don't really watch these things, but these are all propaganda platforms, and I probably should. Anything that's a vector, propaganda vector to the masses should be studied if you're trying to get a feel of the zeitgeist and read the curve. And the curve is what they call it in Leave the World Behind. If you haven't seen it, it's pretty much mandatory watching. Something else too. This is possibly unrelated, but there was this very viral video of an usher at a Pirates game fighting with a fan, a baseball fan, one of the ticket holders. And so you have a fan and the usher fighting, and it's just getting a lot of attention. And I'm just seeing a lot of this type of stuff. Well, anyway, the usher takes out his belt and whips the guy. I mean, I guess people have always behaved this badly, but for some reason, it seems like it's getting a lot of promotion on X. And this is all just what I would call the disease X, where they're amplifying certain things so people will beg for censorship. Let's see. Angst G says, I guess he's going to announce the arrest of Hillary Clinton. Oh, yeah. Yeah, on Friday. Speaking of Q and all that stuff, what is that guy's name? Enrique, the leader of the Proud Boys. He actually came out and said he's Q. And it was sort of a big nothing burger. Just nobody cares, which I think is just bizarre. I think it's bizarre that nobody cares. But the truth will come out. The Q was an operation that was managed by some people under Pete Navarro, connected with Trump. It's just a group of people who found out how to market Trump's vision to a bunch of conspiracy theorists as we're going to solve the conspiracies. I mean, clever marketing, but it's just sad that there are people in 2025 still picking up those Q drops. Like, oh, look, another Q drop. It's like it's stale. It's 8 years old. And they used to do this thing where they would look at a Q drop, and I hate talking about this stuff, but they would say, okay, this was May 5th, 2018, and it's May 5th, 2020. So every time we'd come on an anniversary of one, they would look at it as, oh, this has relevance because it's the second Delta. And then they would go through Trump's tweets and find something that connects to that and interpret that as a signal that he was communicating to them. It's what psychiatrists would call erotomania. And there was this mass erotomania for Trump among the Q people. And then it got transferred to JFK Jr., which is really weird and bizarre, where they were just outright worshiping the guy. Now they don't care about JFK Jr. because they got RFK Jr., who plays with bear carcasses and walks barefoot on airplanes. I don't know how they found that acceptable, but they managed to just go with it. That's a twist I didn't foresee. Then we have something going on here. Michael in Truth points this out. We will see if any further developments happen in the scripted conflict between India and Pakistan. I've always conjectured that the Denver mural with the Trump twins in the middle was a foreshadowing of World War III. Notice the flags depicted: India, Pakistan, US, Russia, Israel, Palestinians. So the infamous Denver mural. And the airport knows that they have this reputation. They used to have signage when I went there once where alien stuff alluded to an underground base. They do have that, isn't it called Blucifer? The big blue horse with the glowing red eyes in front of the airport. It might have been made, I'm not sure. Was it made by the same artist who's from New Mexico who was crushed under one of his own sculptures? I think it's the same guy. Let me just double check this one. Blucifer. Okay, Blue Mustang. Sculpture in Denver, Colorado. It's a cast fiberglass sculpture. And yeah, I believe it's the same guy. Yeah, that's the one. It's notable for its striking appearance and for having killed its sculptor. Colored bright blue with illuminated glowing red eyes, this big blue cast fiberglass sculpture killed its sculptor, Luis Jimenez, when it fell on him in the studio. That's like something out of The Omen. You know, that Antichrist movie. And by the way, Damien Thorne is Donald Trump. There's a lot of parallels between these characters. 9,000 pounds. Yeah, it's pretty big. I've actually seen it a few times, but I'm familiar with the artist's work. He had a sculpture here. Freak accident. All right, let's move on. Yeah, Lucifer crushed him, of all things. That's morbid. All right, next. It's like a sacrifice. So we're looking at the Denver mural. That's my point here. And people have looked at this thing with trepidation for a long time. I think it was even pointed out in William Cooper, Behold a Pale Horse. I mean, I think so. I had to double check this, but it's just been around for a long time. Everybody knows that there's something going on beneath the Denver airport. Reptilian hybrids, underground cities, fake Mars bases. In fact, I mentioned, was it this morning we were talking about the J.G. Ballard 13 to Centaurus, the whole thing about the generational ships and how they were setting up these underground facilities to make people think they were on a spaceship going to this exoplanet. And I mean, that's probably happening. But there is a movie called Orbiter 9, and it's beneath Denver, where they have all these ships going to exoplanets, and these little astronauts, they grow up, their parents put them into this program, and they don't know that they're just being studied. And they're being studied because the scientists need to know that if we have to leave Earth, that human beings are capable of surviving for a couple generations in a small enclosed system. Like little habitat. And I can understand why that would be valuable information. But it's an idea that's been tossed around for some time. The J.G. Bell one came out in like 1960s. Okay, we're going through my Twitter feed. I'd marked a few things. Again, lots of developments of this Hendricks story. Shiloh Hendricks, I believe it's up to $700,000. And something else about it, they say, or she says, that she had to start the GoFundMe because she had been doxxed. Her social security number was out. Her family was in danger. Well, I've been doing a deep dive into it, and I have not been able to find any information about her other than that obituary that connects to somebody who has grandchildren with the names Shiloh Hendricks and some other Hendricks, I think it's Sean, who works with Mr. Beast. That's the only thing we can find. And that hasn't been mentioned in any mainstream articles. No big channels have talked about it. But if true, it's huge because Mr. Beast, one of the biggest YouTube channels out there, having 1 degree separation from this, that's a little noteworthy. And you would think that would be headline news. You think that'd be something that people would want to talk about. But for someone who was doxxed and had their social security number and the gym that they went to and everything else leaked, they are raising a lot of money off of it. So they're obviously afraid of it, but I can't find it, is my point. I haven't been able to find it. If anybody else can look, but it just seems a little shady to me, like a backstory. Maybe because another thing that came out, they claim eviction notices, and then they had some police report regarding domestic disturbances, but we can't even get the age. And I'm bringing this up because somebody found somebody at the same name that might be her, but that person would be 36 or something like that. So it could be, but we're just doing our due diligence. Because I did mention this meme that seemed to connect Mr. Beast, and it's a lead worth following. Now, this is chemtrail long. Representative Leanna Garcia was talking about her bill banning weather modification in Florida, and while she was talking, she passed out. So is either chemtrails or the vax? You tell me.
So, Governor, forgive me. I've got to sit down because I am not feeling well.
She was about to say something about banning weather modification, and she passes out. Conspicuous timing. And that whole chemtrail thing is just proliferating. Everybody's coming up to me, and they're like, look, I've been vindicated. The UK admits that they're doing this. And I've looked at their best evidence, and they're simply misreading it. And at this point, it's a very cultic belief. But I brought this up to Mick West. I said to Mick West in a message, I asked him, has it occurred to you that these aren't simply people who have misinterpreted the observational data, as in we're looking at a cloud and we're thinking it's something else? Like, I don't think it's just a bunch of people getting the wrong answer when we're talking about conspiracy theorists and their sky phobia. Like, I'm suggesting that this is the result of a deliberate propaganda campaign. Here's what I said. Mick West, has it occurred to you that chemtrail conspiracies are not the result of misunderstandings with the observational data, but are in fact psychological operations targeting conspiracy theorists? I would argue the same with regard to UFO beliefs. His full-time gig seems to be calling out UFO specialists as being a bunch of scam artists. And he's also known for debunking chemtrails. But I never see him confronting the idea that both of these are being promulgated on bad faith, possibly by intelligence agencies, with an agenda behind it. And I think the agenda behind the geoengineering phobia is the same agenda as the anti-vax. That these are controlled opposition positions. And if you're not going to be on the pro side, they need you on the anti side. If you're not going to be on Team Greta, they need you on Team Chemtrail. And this is a pattern. It goes deep. And it's the same with UFOs. I've noticed there's a similar thing where people are responding to propaganda when they believe this stuff and bad information, but it's being deliberately sown out there. and I'm just suggesting that it's intentional. Mirageman explains this phenomenon. What's up, Lawson says, is truth sub-objective? Sub-objective? No, it's objective. It really is. But the internal models that we have of the world goes into subjectivity. And what they want you to do is internalize their subjective model and superimpose it over the real thing. And it generally works. You take your Truman Show with you. They don't have to lock you up inside of one. Now, I got into a back and forth with a chemtrail believer. And as they normally do, they go into ad hominem. And she was, mocking me for having low engagement on my tweets. Well, I'm not tweeting for engagement. I don't care about my tweets' engagement. I don't care if I'm shadow banned. The only reason I tweet is so that I have reference material, that I have the stories we're talking about here for the live streams. So my tweets get engagement here when we're live. I don't care about what happens on X. That place is an asylum. But Jessica Lynn is a big chemtrail pusher, and she had ridiculed me for not getting a lot of engagement. So that kind of clued me in to the fact that this is probably another operative, because the only reason they push this stuff is engagement. Well, I said to her this. I basically said that that's a pretty low metric to judge somebody by how many clicks they get on a platform like X. That's totally rigged. And her response was, no, my fixation was showing you that you simply do not matter. No one values you or your views. I have no tolerance for monsters misleading the public. Our children are sick and suffering. Go repent, you evil F. So that was leveled at me for not believing in chemtrails because I'm endangering her children. And there was this person who used to be very popular around the different flat earth conversations. Here's from Canada. And one morning we were talking about this thing when I first started noticing this fixation on these trails. And he got mad at someone who was on our phone call with us because this person said, well, I don't believe in chemtrails. And he said, you know that you're putting my children in danger. You know that my children are going to be living under this because of people like you. And he got pretty mad about it. He was pretty incensed because he saw this as threatening to his children. And it kind of reminds me of Bible believers who see the non-believers as the ones who are going to incur the wrath of God. Like, we're all going to get it because you guys can't behave. So there's some religiosity attached to this. And it's actually kind of similar to how, Gaia, the weather god, like climate change has become this weather god judging us for our misuse of the environment. God judges man for the wickedness with the floods. And even the geoengineering people respond as though you not believing endangers them and is more likely that the weather gods will attack. Like, it's a similar structure. Lean Dion says he needs to get some vinegar. Yeah. Well, yeah, she's definitely one of those what I'd consider to be the cultist types. And yeah, they do, a lot of them do in fact fall for that logical fallacy of faulty causality, where they think if they spray vinegar, it will get rid of chemtrails. And that's the same logical flaw that has people thinking that the chemtrails cause the overcast. He said she needs some vinegar, and I was just looking up the expression full of piss and vinegar. For some reason, it just struck me reading her tweets here. Now, listen to this, though, because she says this. Yeah, basically, you got to go repent. You're evil. You're hurting my kids. But this is the typical thing. It's just the ad hominem attack that you get. And this is all of them. You cannot get one of them to sit down and have a rational conversation. And they're just as irate as the climate change people. And I think it is because of this fundamental fear that the sky is going to fall for our non-belief, that we are as non-believers, we're going to incur the wrath of their God that they fear. So there's some kind of God construct in their head. I think that's what's ultimately behind this. Nothing else explains their irrationality and their fear. Like, oh, you don't fear my God. No, I don't. I'm not Gaia fearing. I don't fear Bill Gates either. I'm not a Bill Gates-ophobe. Bill Gates is going to block the sun. Yeah. It's a big joke, and I think people need to stop being clowns, which is why I use AI to render her with a clown face and a tinfoil hat. Like, I'm anti-conspiracy theorist. I realized it. And I'm not a mainstreamer because they're all anti-conspiracy theories. No, I'm just kind of anti-mainstream and anti the controlled opposition. And at this point, it's pretty clear that it's mostly just useful stooges and propaganda mules, menthol addicts and cultists. So we can go ahead and, feel no pity when we attack its various guardrails and orthodoxies. Just burn it all. Okay, let's see here. Lawson says, meaning subjective and objective as well. My mom says that's your truth and I have mine. No, it doesn't work that way. You got to get rid of this idea that everything is just pure subjectivity, that we all live in our own universes, solipsism. That's encouraged. It's enabled. And it's further, I think, indication that we're going into some kind of a dark age. You can get into your matrix pod if you want. You can trade in the meatverse for the metaverse, and you can train yourself to it. I think that's what they're trying to do. I've postulated before that gaming culture is tied in with the space program, because the space programs, I don't believe it's about taking you to some distant place in outer space, but it's really about controlling the inner space between your ears and also the physical space that you inhabit in the world. And if they could get the entire society to agree to just be locked down, to live vicariously through the screen, then that would be the victory. It would be like achieving all the goals of environmentalism and reducing human impact on the world by getting us to voluntarily acquiesce to just digitally upload our consciousness. Now, you still have a body that you have to feed with stuff that you order online and get drone delivered, like Taco Bell drone deliveries while you're in your basement, but you're always just on the thing, playing the game. Virtual reality, that's the future. And I think the video game culture of sitting down all the time, some of these people with their gaming chairs, and if you're a gamer, I'm not knocking it. It's high art. It's like literature. It's like movies all wrapped into one. But I think that a lot of it's tied into being sedentary and tied in also to the virtual over the, like Ready Player One. Is that Steven Spielberg? I think that's a pretty good indicator of where things are going. Okay, let's see here. Thank you for feeding the crack, Gwen. Who was that posted it? I don't see the name, but thank you for keeping gas in the tank. And we have an agenda here. We have a plan, the infinite plan. And I've been trying different things out. Again, as you know, I'm always testing things out. And today I had the AI take the transcript from the IPS morning deprogram. And I said, okay, I could just have a dry transcript and post it. Who's going to read it? So I said, write this as a dialogue between Mothman and a chupacabra in a diner. And it did. It took my entire hour-and-a-half live stream and turned it into a dialogue. And then I took that dialogue to ChatGPT and I said, write this out for publication as a short story, add a lot more additional content to it, make it more of a short story than just a script. So add some substance to it. And it did. And then I went ahead and just published it on Kindle as part of a series. So I'm thinking here, I can take all of these transcripts. We have a lot of conversations. We're always talking to callers with these like extended phone calls, and I could turn it into fiction where it's uncensorable and then have it published as a series on Kindle. Very easy to do. Takes 20 minutes, audiobook series, print book series. The point of it really is making this something that can't be censored, uncensorable. It's nothing new. We've done this before. there's a book called The Capstone Event by, well, if you know, Jim Fetzer was censored on Amazon for his book about Sandy Hook. So I said, I contacted him and I said, hey, I'm doing publishing. Let's take your book on Sandy Hook and let me have it rewritten as fiction. And then we'll call it something. And we did. And it's one of his, it's still selling. He's still making money off that book, The Capstone Event. But at the time, he was being censored. And I said, we can use fiction to get past the censors. And I had this entire idea of just making this a standard part of what we do. And that whole book thing with him, I mean, he really, his publisher abandoned him. Jim Fetzer took a lot of hits over the whole Sandy Hook thing. Now, as far as the book goes, I took this general outline and I outsourced it to people on Fiverr. And that's how the publishing company operated, is we would hire a bunch of writers and then they would send me stuff, you know, page here, page there, and I'd Frankenstein it together and publish it. I do the same thing now with ChatGPT. And it's better quality. And it's improving all the time. So the idea that I could take a 2-hour live stream and turn it into a 15-page short story format in 20 minutes, it's kind of miraculous. And what's more, I'm thinking here too, is that we're looking at, you know, a long-term strategy that's completely sustainable, but actually is faithful to the information. It's not taking our content and making it into some in like kind of, you know, the general AI stuff. Sometimes it can be vague, verbose, word salady, but no, I'm actually telling it, keep the quotes, you know, keep everything as spoken. Minimal embellishments. But the concept here kind of started earlier anyway. We were experimenting with AI created content for doing tabloids and stuff. But anyway, a little tangent. But times have really changed and things are going to get more interesting. I saw this video this morning of Donald Trump addressing a group of people, and he was saying some things that were just kind of off the chain. Here it is. Trump just hit a new level of unfiltered. It feels like vintage Trump on steroids, unreal. Now, turns out it was unreal. This was AI generated. Trump never said this. If it wasn't for community notes, I might have fallen for this one. It didn't strike me as fake. And this is something that anybody can do. It's like I said earlier the other day, the democratization of the tools of production when it comes to mass media. This was stuff that ordinarily would have taken expert animators in a studio, time, money, and a budget. And now anybody can do it. It's just the tip of the iceberg. And most of the people, I would posit, are not double checking it. In fact, there are studies on this. You know, years ago, there were studies on this that something like 90% of the people just retweet stuff they like. Never let facts get in the way of a good narrative. Truth Hurts 21 says they're setting the stage for Trump to be. Yes, I can see the buildup. And that's kind of what we saw last year around this time. And the whole theme of Trump being a martyr. I mean, look at how they overlay so many stories on top of this. On 4/4/2023, he's arrested. That's Holy Week. SNL that Sunday had him as at the Last Supper. Marjorie Taylor Greene compared him to Christ. So the whole Christification of Trump thing was at its peak. 4/4/2023 as he goes to jail. And do you know what he did with his suit that he wore to jail? He had it cut into 47 pieces and they auctioned it off, which made me think about the robes of Christ as he was, you know, led to the cross, and the Romans ripped it off and gambled with it. And then that was also the 55th anniversary of the assassination of MLK. And then, of course, it overlapped with the filming of Joker 2, which is relevant and weird, but true. People driving by thought that the crowd was there for Trump and is there for the Joker, you know, Joaquin Phoenix, which, again, there's a lot of subtext here if you get into the meta script of it and these various actors who play these roles. None of these alignments are coincidental. Joker 2 of course, was being filmed, and it was Heath Ledger's birthday. So Heath Ledger would have been 44 on 4/4/2023. And then we have the new Joker called the Phoenix. Some of the significances there, I think, have to do with the second coming, Joker 2, and of course, Trump being personified as this Christ-like martyr, which sounds absurd. They've compared him to Trump, to King David, to Moses. We're just waiting for him to be fully elevated to God, just apotheosis. They worship their leaders, in this political religion. Now, what does he say in the doctored clip? Let me go ahead and get the audio. I'll go ahead and play it so you can hear it. And you can tell me if you think that this is believable, because it fooled me. But I was fooled by a whale-sized clownfish because of a deep fake I saw on TikTok, I believe, in whale size. Okay, so here we go. This is Donald Trump hitting a new level of unfiltered.
No offense, but she's repulsive, a disgusting woman through and through. But as I was saying, I can't tell who's crazier these days, the mental patients sent to us by every third world hellhole on the planet, or a homegrown George Soros-funded terrorists, Antifa, I believe they're called. Very bad people, some of the worst. They've got little trash can riot shields, very gay looking, very unathletic, very unlovable. I was telling a friend of mine the other day, I bet these people's dads won't take their calls. No phone calls from a terrorist is what the dads say. Maybe even a mom. That's the consensus.
That's pretty good. That's nuanced. I was against the idea that Alex Jones had been replaced because I said there's no way that his idiosyncratic personality, all of his emotions, there's no way that an actor could do that, and they could possibly train an AI on it. But I don't know. It kind of struck me as impossible to do. But now I'm like looking at Trump and the nuance they provided here, and I guess you got decades of content. We shouldn't underestimate it. Even though they suck with faking space, they're pretty good with almost everything else now. So there you have it. That's totally fake, and most people didn't notice. Thank you, Community Notes. I like the Community Notes. If somebody steals content and monetizes it, Community Notes can actually take note of this and demonetize that content. So the system's getting better. Somebody said, Copacetic said, William Wallace was cut to pieces too. Braveheart meme. Fascinating. Yes, because see, Trump was superimposed with Braveheart at Butler. We talked about this at length. If you want to see all the evidence for this, watch One-Eyed Jack's video, Dawn of the New Day. But the Braveheart Trump connection, the Mel Gibson connection to all this, very interesting. But in Braveheart, the character does have a Christ-like martyrdom. His friends watch him die. Some kind of dismemberment is implied. Very Christy. I'm talking about Mel Gibson. And I was thinking too how in Mad Max, there's this scene where Mel Gibson's character is walking across the land and he's got the last 2 tanks of gasoline. So they're out of gas, but if he can just get this gas, he can save the world. So he's like walking across the desert with this pole across his back. And then at the ends of the poles, he's got these gas cans. And it was very much like a crucifixion, like holding the cross. But instead of the blood to save the world, it was the gasoline. And again, this is how they attach certain archetypes to characters. It's all often in the visuals and the subtext. But this is not a coincidence, nor is it unrelated to the fact that Mel Gibson employed 33-year-old Jim Caviezel to play Jesus. And on the set of the making of The Passion of the Christ, he was whipped with a scourge for real and has a 14-inch scar. So he says. On the 5th take of Sermon on the Mount, he was struck by lightning and he died, and they resurrected him. So they say. You can believe this if you want. And still at the age of 33, he gets into the Count of Monte Cristo, where they filmed that. And in that another connection that's interesting, because if you know that story, the character is in a tomb, in a dungeon for 16 years, and then he finally breaks out, like Jesus exiting the tomb. And anyone care to guess how old the character Jim Caviezel is playing is in Count of Monte Cristo when he escapes the prison? Edmond Dante. Yep, 33. Lots of stuff. Again, Passion of the Christ. I think it has a remake coming up very soon as well. Mel Gibson's a meta-scripter. He's a big-time meta-scripter. Look at his movies: Conspiracy Theory, Patriot, more recently Flight Risk, which coincided with the aerial immolations as we predicted. Okay, let's continue. Rome says the hands and fingers are getting better, but the hands still look a bit out of proportion. At this point, though, we can see the trend, and it's only going to get better. That's a guarantee. So we might as well just plan for it. I look at some of my AI glitches where, something's screwed up, the lettering's off, it misspells something. I don't correct it, because at some point we're not going to have that anymore. We're not going to have what's almost like human error, and we might miss it. So glitches is like vintage stuff to me. I have some prints that I have where I'm just not going to correct the stuff. I like these little glitches. All right, let's see here. Zane Collins says, hey, Tim, are we still going to have the IPS basketball meetup in Cincinnati this Friday? I'm not sure what you're talking about. Half of you can't ball. I sense it. I am not all that good at basketball. I'm not opposed. I have a question, though. Does anybody here think that NBA is rigged to the extent that they're using magnets, in the balls, like metal rings in the balls and magnets on the rim? Because Jake the A-hole has some pretty compelling presentations of videos that make it seem like it's probably true that one of the big secrets is that these ball games are rigged with magnets. That also applies to football. I mean, I guess soccer's honest. I don't know how they could fake that. And we're not talking we're not just saying rigging stuff. We're talking about technologies that allow them to catch the balls, like magnetic gloves and stuff you wouldn't think. Magic tricks. Ain't she says, I wonder how Mel Gibson and AI depict hell in Passion 2. Zane says, the main three people I listen to for information about the world stage are IPS, Jake, and Mag Bitter. You know what I should do? Is I should get Jake the A-hole and Mag Bitter Truth's YouTube channels listed for the Hoax Report. So if you don't know what the Hoax Report is, go to autohoax.com, and there you can see we have 19 people listening. Unfortunately, they're not hearing the live stream. I have to get the premium version of StreamYard to stream to that. I'll get back to that tomorrow. But the Hoax Report is for the latest in psyops, media hoaxes, and predictive programming analysis. Kind of like the Drudge Report. Coincidentally, after I made this, the White House created something called the WH Report, just exactly like this. I'm wondering if somebody who I know is part of the White House press corps had something to do with it. Anyway, this is basically everybody who's anybody from the off-world stage perspective. You'll find John the Bond, Fakeologist, all of our content, people who, for example, mindwar.page is here. And it's just dynamic content. These are links that update. A lot of different forums are represented here. A lot of stuff from Fakeologists. But I want to have more content creators, and I can take your YouTube. So if you want to find like a hub, go to the Hoax Report. And anybody there is essentially somebody that we've vetted. Truth Hurt says, Mag Bitter Truth over there talking about Parmesan cheese and vanilla extract being fake. Yeah, Mag Bitter Truth is a fake detector. And I haven't followed his work in some time, but he has the correct level of disdain for the mass media. I don't imagine that he's ever backslid into believing stuff again. Yeah, Jake the Orifice. You can say whatever. Jake the A-hole is actually one of the, I think, more reputable fake detectors. I haven't really seen him slip into the habit of, or just the consensus trance. I think he was certainly calling out the fake Cape Perry rocket launch. And did that even matter? Nobody's going to wake up. It's like, look, the entire right-wing media ecosystem was calling the Cape Perry thing fake. And has that moved us closer to some kind of collective awakening? No. They were just like, it's fake because it's DEI, because it's women. That was it. That was their takeaway. They didn't follow through with it. Like, well, if there's any indication of fake, then it's fraud. And it opens up a can of worms. But they never get to the can of worms. Like, we have that can of worms. We're ready to dump it on the world stage. But all these people, like Valuetainment, these big channels are calling out these hoaxes, but they're careful not to go too far, or they just don't go too deep. Their coverage is just shallow. And we are, the way we follow things, and my take on this is that we shouldn't ignore the stuff that seems fake and fishy. Like, oh, it's fake, ignore it. It's a distraction. No, that's what you should focus on. And that's what we do here is we study, get the nuance, and we make a good effort at due diligence for every one of these things. Rome says, nah, soccer, they control the ball somehow. They put more spin than they ever have before and after. That's another sport. The crowd isn't allowed to keep the game balls. Right, exactly. You open it up, and it's got some kind of system in there designed to allow it to be switched on and off so they can steer it towards the goal. You should add Jurassic Liars to that list. Okay, says Jesse's girl. I will. Let me go ahead and put that in my to-do here. So Jurassic Liars, Mag Bitter, JTA, and this hub is one of the main sites I'm going to promote. Like, I have a lot of websites, I have a lot of blogs, but I really want the Hoax Report to be the place that the off-world stage perspective centers around, and anybody who meets a certain standard of discernment should be listed here. And if you scroll to the bottom, I am listing the autohoax.com PSYOP trading cards, and I have some more to list here. In fact, just scroll down to the bottom. You have crisis actors, drill. And once we have 30 of these PSYOP trading cards completed, I'm going to order the actual playing cards, like Pokemon cards, and then I'm going to have the content written on the back. I've already found the printer I'm going to use, and it's totally achievable. Thirst says, I wonder if Mag still thinks there's a blue diamond dome over us. Well, he has the sense to recognize that we can't trust the model as presented to us by NASA. Was he a domer? Probably. Truth Hurt says he says some dumb stuff. Well, I'm pretty sure he's a T-vestigator. And I was just listening to Mr. E on Fakeologist. It's like for half an hour, I was just listening. And Mr. E was talking about how if you look at Ted Nugent and his photos from the 60s, there's clearly something going on. So in other words, this right-wing icon who is known for being just blatantly, sexist and toxic masculinity and all that, big gun guy, animal killer, that according to Mr. E, Ted Nugent is a woman. And I think he said the same thing about Kid Rock. Now, I've never seen Mr. E, but he exists. He's just this kind of shadowy character, supposedly for his own good. But, I don't know if I have a hard time trusting people who are completely anonymous. It makes me think that they have something to hide. You can use a pseudonym. You don't have to use a real name. But the fact that he's this completely anonymous person, but he has this certain conspiracy theory cornered, it makes me wonder if it's some kind of a limited hangout. Or maybe he just doesn't want Ted Nugent to kick his ass. Space Chimp says it's fake because of the drills. Well, no, when we look at these various events, one of the hoax indicators are concurrent drills, concurrent programming in the entertainment, and the immediate and obvious political utility that both sides attach to, where it's utterly predictable in how the political arena is going to address it. So you can see if it's a what you would call a perception management operation or a PR stunt, an influence operation, and that's what we're looking at. Most major news stories are, in fact, I think, influence operations. I think that would be the appropriate way to describe them. Okay, continuing here. This morning we were talking about this UFO guy who's been widely discredited. Ufology is worse than Scientology. Like, if you believe in UFOs, you're a cultist more than a Scientologist is a cultist. And it's here on the record that this individual that is making the headlines for sharing this image purported to be a flying saucer that was doctored, that he is in fact admitted doing counterintelligence. And that's from 2022 that he admits this. So you got some counterintelligence agent testifying in Congress about UFOs and then making all the UFO believers look crazy, incredulous, and gullible. Okay, moving on. Neurojack says, the Mr. Beast connection is incredible. If you haven't looked at his TV show, I recommend at least the first and last 2 episodes. Seems very scripted and psyop related. Yeah, Mr. Beast is very popular, and it's suggested here, and I have the breakdown. Another use for AI, and this was done with Grock, by the way. If you haven't used Grock, I use Grock quite a bit. I use it for a lot of things. You know, I could probably put together a list as an article of uses for it. One of them is this. So I get this meme. It's got Shiloh Hendricks, has some obituary, has some lines connecting people. You know, one of these conspiracy memes. So I just handed it to Grock, and I said, break this down for me. Let me know if it's valid. And it says, this image appears to be a collage highlighting potential inconsistencies or connections involving Shiloh Hendricks and a fundraising campaign. Here's your breakdown. And it shows this archived obituary link. It says survivors include children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Among them are Shiloh and Sean Hendricks. Mentions the fundraising campaign. And then it talks about how Sean Hendricks does media and security for Mr. Beast. And then he's also connected to a few other things. Says the bio confirms that Sean Hendricks is associated with Mr. Beast. Connections and implications. Shiloh Hendricks, linked to the obituary, is running a large fundraising campaign. Her brother, as per the obituary, has a history with Mr. Beast, who works in media and security. The highlighted text and arrow suggests skepticism or investigation into the campaign's legitimacy, questioning whether the Mr. Beast connection is being leveraged for fundraising. So my point being here, I used the AI in a few seconds to break this down and find any additional information that might validate it. And based on this, I'm still leaning towards this is likely true. Yes, I got Grock auto hoaxing. Grock is just extremely useful for a lot of things. Like I said, I have some uses for it that I've been testing out, and a lot of it is going to be automated. Like I said, I will take, like next time Lynn calls in and we talk, I could turn that into a comic strip, you know, with the dialogue bubbles in a matter of minutes. And I have all these prompts saved, so I'm thinking about doing a tutorial. I mean, back when we started this channel, we started doing these like meme clinics, meme engineers, meme engineering. Like, oh, if you don't know how to meme, here's how you do a crop and drop. And a lot of people who weren't into memes suddenly got into it because of what we were doing. And it was just kind of fun. And in the process, we all learned all these different tools. And I'd like to do that again, but this time with the latest tech. So that's kind of my intention here. And the PSYOP trading cards are just one example where I think that if a group of us were working on a project, I think we could probably come up with some interesting stuff. Estevan says, got to give Lynn the casino glasses. Well, the whole thing with this transcript is it breaks it down into callers, so the AI can just readily translate it. Zane says, Mag calls out of the space launch with the women. He said it was funny. He went deep. He said he hit space with a bat. I'll have to see what you're talking about. Send me a link. I haven't checked out Mag's Bitter Truth in a long time, so I can't say. But I'm just glad that he's still doing it. Because how many people are deconstructing media, auto-hoaxing media? How many people are doing it at this level? Not many. And I talk about the frames and the boxes for a reason. And the other day, I mean, I'm really thankful for that security guard's opinion and then his own attempts to make sense of it, because that shows you the quandary, the issue that we're facing here is that you can tell somebody the truth, but if their perspective is framed by the mainstream mediation, it just won't make sense. There's this compartmentalization that has taken place, and a lot of it is voluntary. You know, if you're a regular normie news consumer one day, but then you start to get the feeling that something's not right with the world. Well, if you lean left, you go to Woketown. If you lean right, you go to Trutherville. But these are parallel belief systems, packaged, ready-made, highly funded. You have influencers, limited hangout operatives, ideologues, demagogues, and now AI agents that are 6 times more persuasive than humans, let loose to change people's opinions. And that University of Zurich thing, something of a scandal on Reddit, because they had bots on Reddit convincing BLM supporters to turn against BLM. And these bots would pose as black and then saying, I'm against BLM. I mean, that's nefarious, but it's also just probably the tip of the iceberg. Like, this is admitted. And it's beyond just bots and automated responses. You know, these are AI agents that have been fed a knowledge base. I mean, I have my own I've been working with. I've been working with bots that are programmed with everything that I've written, and then this forms their frame of reference. I turn them into skeptics, auto hoax bots. I have a bot on Blue Sky that gets retweets and hearts. And all it does is every day it responds to anything CNN says with this pre-programmed response that's basically going to raise questions about the integrity of the headline. And to me, it looks like a generic bot, but I see people responding to it. I'm like, okay, it's growing. Lawson says the cards should be bestsellers at stores like Spencer's and Hot Topic. Make some bank, Tim. Well, that's one of the things that we were talking about in Discord the other day, yesterday, I think, is that the PSYOP trading cards have a market, and it's sort of a Trojan horse because everybody in Trutherville loves the Illuminati playing cards for some reason. And I do too. I mean, the Illuminati playing cards are great. And it's an example of predictive programming, but it's also kind of probably, it's likely how they really do things, like these tabletop exercises. So these things are kind of just taken as sort of ironic because they're probably true, even if it's not literally true. But the PSYOP trading cards, I think, would appeal to the same people. Only these aren't conspiratorial cards, but more like these are media deconstruction, fakeology, and, you know, the same, covering the same ground, but from a different perspective. And I think that we could Trojan horse Trutherville with these cards. So that's the whole point, that this could be the mind virus, that it might just be the accelerant that we need. And I thought, what is it going to be? Because something like Auto Hoax 101 might be too dense, and it's kind of like preaching to the choir. It's kind of hard to get people who aren't already in the fold to read something that is somewhat technical, but when it comes to PSYOP trading cards, each one of these will make a very valid point. And I'll be using the back side of it to explain what we're actually talking about with each of these events. So as you'll see, like I have one with the Boston bombing that I think that, and that's another thing too that we can talk about when we get into learning how to use AI. Like, how do you get a bunch of people with their legs blown off after a marathon with the FBI around taking pictures? How do you get AI to do that? Because it's trained not to create this content. And the way I did it, the way I do these things is usually stuff like, you can't put a bunch of joggers on the ground writhing in pain, but you can say a bunch of joggers on the ground stretching with strained looks on their faces. You can't say bomb in the background, but you can say fog. I mean, you just have to know how to talk to it, kind of coerce it. But this is something that I saw coming early on. If you recall, Dolly had this scandal where just some guy had rendered an image of Mickey Mouse hijacking an airplane and flying it into the Twin Towers. You know, pretty funny stuff. But they said this is beyond the pale, and they lobotomized Dolly. And just the other day, I asked Dolly to create for me an image of the Pope burning in hell, and it gave me the Pope holding a bunny in a garden. Just the opposite of what I asked for. That's the guard railing. They're trying to curtail what you can do as far as taking what's in your mind, your imagination, and projecting it out. It's like masking your mind. That's what they're doing when they're limiting what you can produce creatively with these internal guardrails. And I thought, why should they sabotage and limit the whole thing because one person made an image that's offensive to some people? That would be like taking away everybody's crayons because one kid drew an offensive picture. But the public went along with it. They said, yep, we can't have people making images of Mickey Mouse hijacking planes. Like, who decided that was offensive? How come that's not considered to be art? Maybe it means something else. It's a broader statement. I mean, you could probably read it. I mean, we're at a time where some guy duct tapes a banana to a wall, and it's a multi-million-dollar art piece. So I think we can have a little bit of wriggle room here for Mickey Mouse. Okay, let's see here. Rome says you should stamp these trading cards with numbers like they do with other types of trading cards, so each one has a limited amount made. Okay. Yes, and so right now these are just stickers, because to get the cards you have to buy them in bulk to make it cost effective. And you can look at these as drafts. So once I have the 30 or so, we're going to finalize the borders, the details, the font, and any of these other details you think of, I will include them, because these will be collectible in that way. And one other thing too, Anx G says, if they're playable cards, perhaps have them play off the Illuminati cards in a mockable fashion. Well, I want to make it into a game. So I thought we'll find some kind of comparable game, give it to AI, and just tell us to make it a new one. So we will do it. And I think that we should definitely, maybe not kickstart it, but maybe I'll have to do this. I'll have to come up with some kind of crowdfunding thing where everybody who pitches a couple dollars gets one, because you have to buy them in bulk and you print them one card at a time in sets of 20. That's kind of how it works. So you're not really buying, the whole mixed up deck. I would like to have them wrapped and packaged like they do Pokemon cards, but we'll see what's possible very soon. All right, let's get back to the Satanic Met Gala 2025. Every year, Met Gala is held during the pagan Beltane rituals. This is from Red Pill Drifter. And I agree with this. Timing-wise, it's very suspect. A time of high Luciferian rituals as human sacrifices are carried out to bring in the blessings of the god of fertility and prosperity. This is why the flowers and flowered carpet. And there is someone here in a red dress. I don't know who that is. Here we have dressed in all red overcoat with a cape resembling Satan, with a Dracula vampire medallion and red shoes. It's kind of interesting how the various events like music awards, the Grammys, these Met Galas, these fashion shows are poured over by rage bait seeking conservative types who are looking for the devil in everything. But is this guy dressed with the devil? Is that your association? I mean, I kind of guess so. Maybe he's got a point. Here's another one. It says, I don't care what you say. This is a Baphomet ritual ceremony. Now, who is that? Is that Madonna? I don't know who it is. They're almost interchangeable at this point. But I'm not really offended by their wardrobes. Kamala Harris crawls out of her lair to show you her black and white dress, representing her occult duality, as above, so below. Her Cruella de Vil dress tells you everything. Okay, this is interesting. I haven't seen Kamala Harris in a bit. The black and white dress. Now, Kamala Harris has been very prevalent in these various instances that we discuss of predictive programming as we talk about these parallels. For example, in Captain America or Megalopolis or the Homelander, you have a Trump character and the Obama character that orchestrates the assassination attempt in all these different movies. But in some of these, you have a Kamala stand-in. For example, in Fallout. In Fallout, Betty Pearson, I believe, would be the representative for Kamala Harris, and they steal the election in Vault 33, that whole scenario. And then Civil War is definitely about Trump winning, and then there's this civil war over it. And the whole movie is the media following the people who are going to go take him out. And when they have the president on the ground, and he's obviously Trump, they bring in a black female soldier to kill him. And when I saw that, it's like, this is pretty ham-fisted. It's obviously Kamala, taking back the election. I haven't finished watching it. I probably should now that I think about it. Robert De Niro plays a former president, obviously Biden, I would imagine, in that movie called 0 Day, which has a 9/11-like scene. It has an auto hoaxer at the very beginning who gets attacked by the mob for saying that people are crisis actors. It's got this blackout scenario. I'll have to watch it, but it seemed to be Robert De Niro as Biden and his biographers talking to him, suggesting that he was forced to step down against his own wishes. I'll have to check it out, but I remember watching it and there were some clues in there. Again, Robert De Niro is a major player in these various PSYOP associated movies. And that's what we're pointing out. These big movie productions generally are associated real time with major news events, major influence operations disguised as real world happenings. I call it concurrent programming. Predictive programming is real. It's never been debunked, but you can kind of ignore it safely if you can convince yourself these are merely coincidences or it's the simulation at work. Those are safe explanations. But the truth of it is the programming is concurrent, which is one of the dead giveaways that it's a government operation, that they have co-opted all entertainment media because the timing of the releases is very specific to fake news events. All right, let's continue here. Nicole Kidman looks like she ran out of adrenochrome. When will you answer for the allegations made by Fiona Barnett and the satanic ritual abuse she endured at your hands in the Ninth Circle satanic child sacrifice cult? It's a mouthful. Nicole Kidman being accused of being a part of some satanic cult. This is Eyes Wide Shut connection, I think. Nicole Kidman is in some very good movies, but Eyes Wide Shut is the one that I think is the frame of reference here. Many conspiracy theorists believe that Stanley Kubrick was whistleblowing, telling us what really goes on behind the scenes, and they killed him because of what he was going to release, and they chopped out certain parts of the movie. That's some of the conjecture, but I think his death was faked. He didn't die at that time. I think he was certainly alive. I agree with Chartward that Kubrick was alive because he was directing 9/11, his magnum opus. In fact, didn't he specifically die like 666 days before 9/11? I'm pretty sure of it. And that number, all these numbers, what do they mean? I don't know. Inside communications, but the 666 is one of these ones that's, yeah, it's kind of blatant. And beyond that, in Eyes Wide Shut, there's a scene where he's reading a newspaper, and these are all props that the art directors make, that this stuff is not accidental. And I think what they said was the person that wrote the obituary for the dead prostitute killed by the cult is the same person that wrote the obituary for Stanley Kubrick or something like that. I have to look, but there are some indications that Stanley Kubrick's death was faked. I'm not saying he's still alive, but one of the errors that many conspiracy theorists make is they think that Kubrick was so good at movies, they recruited him to fake the moon landing. It's like nothing could be further from the truth. He had his hands in the directing of many psychological operations, Apollo 11, 9/11. His fingerprints are all over 2020, which it's his work that was carried on after, but also the JFK assassination, the death of JFK Jr. There's quite a lot that we could point at as the work of Kubrick, but he's not an anomaly. He's one of many metascriptors. I mentioned Mel Gibson, Spike Lee, metascriptor, Jordan Peele, James Cameron, and then you have a whole slew of authors we could list, like Tom Clancy, the guy who wrote Leave the World Behind. When I say metascriptors, I'm talking about filmmakers who are working for the government as propagandists and putting their covert messaging in movies to influence people. But not only that, but to provide a frame of reference for real-time psychological operations. And it's this entrainment between entertainment and news that's the big conspiracy that the conspiracy theorists have missed. And we're the only ones who've really honed in on it. It's the only conspiracy theory worth talking about because it's the only provable one. And it's not even a conspiracy theory. This alignment between entertainment and news is systemic fakery. It's structural. We predict it with regularity. Iman says, adolescence coming out just before a hoax incel attack is a prime example of media foreshadowing. A few comments in the news video seem to have seen through it. You know, I like to see that. I've noticed this. Like, for example, someone had questioned this premise that predictive programming is real, and they're like, well, nobody notices this stuff. Like, no, take a look at this. For example, Machete, 2010, terrible movie. Senator McLaughlin is giving a speech about immigrants, comparing them to insects and being very disparaging. During the speech, he gets shot. Then his assassin has his ear shot, which is kind of alluding to it. But I pointed that out back when Robert De Niro was expressing his Trump derangement syndrome out in front of the courthouse. I said, let's look at De Niro's various roles as they pertain to the assassination attempt. And it hadn't happened yet when we were talking about this. So we're looking at Travis Bickle, played by De Niro, taxi driver, inspired the guy that shot Reagan. Travis Bickle, the inspiration for Joker, who shoots Murray Franklin, played by De Niro, on TV in The Joker. So we're making these connections. And then I see Machete, where he's this senator making these xenophobic comments when he's shot at. Well, then Trump gets shot. What was he talking about? Well, he was pointing at the sign, which is what magicians do. You get everybody to look over here while you do your little trick here. So he's pointing at the sign, says, look at that beautiful sign. 22 million illegal immigrants are coming in our cities. He sounds like Senator McLaughlin, practically verbatim, reading the lines from a movie 15 years prior, foreshadowing him before he was even in politics. And at that precise moment, he was shot. We have so many examples of these things that we've noted, but we were able to more or less reverse engineer. We're like, there's no way that De Niro is really Trump deranged, but rather this is likely connecting his world stage actions with all of his previous movie incarnations. So then, someone had said, well, there's no way people notice this stuff. Well, what I did was I went to that video from Machete, and 30 minutes after Trump was shot, there were people saying the same thing that I'm saying here. Hey, this just happened. You can go look on YouTube at the video from Machete where he gets shot. Look in the comments, and on July 13th, the people are right there. So people do remember. It's 15 years prior, but it's buried in your mind, and these things are associations. And if you watch that movie, the senator was the bad guy. You're supposed to be on the side of the assassin against the xenophobic senator. And then more recently, the movie Mickey 17 came out, where Mark Ruffalo is playing a Trump-esque character, turns politics into a cult, does a little dance. He's talking about colonizing an all-white planet. More xenophobia. What happens? He gets shot at and a bullet grazes his face. So are you going to say that's art is imitating life? No, that movie was filmed. It was in the can, edited before Trump was shot. So how do you explain that? And we have so many examples of this that the coincidence explanation does not suffice. If you say coincidence, you haven't looked. The other explanations have all fallen short. What we have discerned here is that, no, we're looking at systemic alignments, systemic fakery, but we're looking at a synchronization. So it looks like synchronicity to the uninitiated. Yes, that's what he said, InksG. Red Rover, let the terrorists come over, then he shot. Space Chimp says, I remember you talking about that movie before it happened. Exactly. We were gathering all of our predictive programming for the Trump assassination attempt thing because we knew it was going to happen. One of the more, I think, blatant examples is Caesar Catalina in Francis Ford Coppola's movie. And this is interesting for a few reasons, but it's a Trump-esque character. He is shot, but he survives. His right eye's damaged, and he fixes it, and it's like a miracle. But Francis Ford Coppola also did the whole Godfather thing. And there's this association in The Godfather between oranges and the assassination attempt, if you recall, where the oranges from the cart fall on the ground when he survives an assassination attempt. Well, Tony Soprano is drinking orange juice at the end of season 1, and the assassin shoots at him. And this is relevant because Trump was also characterized as a mob boss. The whole a bad Don we were talking about, he's a bad Don. And this was a characterization they really built up leading up to his trial. Well, Tony Soprano, a very bad mafia Don, is shot at the end of season 1, and it hits his ear. So the season 1 closes where he's got the ear patch on, just like the one that Trump wore. Well, you have the connection, the illusion with the orange juice, and I'm thinking, what does this mean? I don't know. But Trump, the orange man, the symbolism just runs so deep, but it connects all these things. And not in a grasping at straws, cherry-picking, fallacious way, but in the way that you look at a novel and you just unpack its structure, or a movie. And that's what we're doing. We're looking at a movie, but we don't make the error of thinking that because everything on TV is skewed and much of it is fake, that reality is fake, which is what they want. If you break from the consensus trance, the tendency is to fall into subjectivity and diagnosable insanity, which is what it becomes. Paranoia. The skyphobics are just the tip of the iceberg. Space Chimp says, did Tony Soprano's ear come back to life like Trump's? Yeah, Trump's miraculous ear. And there's some symbolism there too, because the guy that photographed the bullet whizzing by Trump's ear, I think his name was it Richard Gill? Who was the photographer that photographed Trump's assassination attempt? Because he had some camera that was capable of catching the bullet as it went right by Trump's ear. Well, anyway, let's see if I can find this picture. He's the same guy that photographed George Bush on 9/11 when the terror attack was happening, and they were telling George Bush, and then he looks, kind of frozen for a second. Well, that is the same photographer. Yeah, it was Doug Mills. Richard Drew's the guy that did The Falling Man and RFK falling to his death 33 years sooner. But yeah, Doug Mills, thank you. He's the one who did this one. But what's the symbolism here? The bullet going by the ear, whispering into Bush's ear. There is an esoteric meaning to it, I'm sure. But just the fact that the same AP photographer was there, not to mention in symbolism, you got the 9/11 connections that are built into this. Iman says, could it be meaningful that William of Orange, who claimed the English throne in the Glorious Revolution, was funded by Jayish bankers? I don't really think so. I look at any kind of scapegoating of Jew, and look, the fact that you have to hyphenate J-ish, I don't know why you do that. It makes it look like we have to do this because we're being oppressed and we got to stay under the radar. I don't think you have to censor. But what I would say is that the concept that the world is controlled by Jewishness is analogous and equivalent to saying the world is controlled by whiteness. What's the difference? When I see somebody talking about Jewish bankers, it's like you might as well be talking about the man and systemic racism. So which is it, critical race theory or critical Jew theory? Both of you are wrong, and both sides are on the political horseshoe. So I would say it has nothing to do with that. You can't say you have a point and the other side doesn't. And these are mirrors. And one of my purposes here is to map this out. And I have charts that I've been developing and infographics to map out where people are mentally. Where are you in their Truman Show? Or have you stepped out of it? And if you're still if you're still chasing some smelly red herring planted there by operatives 20 years ago, then chances are you're still in the forest of fakery. You're still in the Truman Show. If you're still in identity politics, you're still in the Truman Show. And I'm attempting here to, well, what we've already done is we've kind of quarantined. We have a completely separate set of presuppositions here. But as a rule, if you're woke or anti-woke, you're under their spell. You're mind controlled. And I pointed to that security guard as an example of what mind control looks like. Mind control looks like confused people who don't know what they really believe, who can't discern real from fake. They're at the mercy, they're subjective, they're dependent on media. It's a place of weakness, of vulnerability and confusion, and I'm just not there. And if you're still chasing around a red herring, you are there. And these are things that have other beliefs attached to them. Like, you're not just like partially woke. There's a premise you accept, and there's a cluster of beliefs. So I try not to get in the box with these people. What's that expression again? George Bernard Shaw, never wrestle with a pig, because you both get muddy and the pig likes it. And I see a lot of this stuff, especially identity politics, as playing in the mud. Like it's a rigged game. In war games, it has that tagline, strange game, the only winning move is not to play. And I think that's certainly the case. Okay, we'll be back likely tomorrow morning. As I said earlier, I'm up super early, and we're preparing for a summer of PSYOPs. So I want to kind of get acclimated to this IPS morning deprogram and evening. And I'll have phones open tomorrow. I'm still trying to figure out how it works with this new system. But this is One-Eye Jack and the Shells, dawn of the new day. See you tomorrow. Thanks for the comments, and thanks for the support.
hey, he's a funny man, got jokes for days. He's a dog, he's a real bad dog. If the 10 and hits to save the day. Some people say, Trump is Elvis. He can loop all night long. It's hard to know, cause Elvis is shady. Now the new world order is cool again. Magic bullets sign through the air. Bend down, put some ketchup on his ear. He's a real dog, he's a bad dog. Greater than Elvis, he's a bad dog. Magic bullet, it's a magic guy. Ain't no need to ask why. You have to hoax them gently, and you have to hoax them hard. When you hoax them like it, you make them snap the glove.